Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for King Thor Issue 4, and this is an epic conclusion to Jason Aaron's run with Thor, and it is a truly fitting end to this giant saga that we have had with Thor. So, it starts off, and we've seen that, of course, Gorr has pretty much taken over the universe and is trying to do his own thing, and Thor's pretty much going to become Ragnarok to it, the End Father, and just fight with everything he's got. And we just see Gorr gloating and saying how he's going to destroy him and make a better universe and everything, and just like, screw you, I've gotten to a point where you can't do anything to me. And then we see how Thor's kind of like thinking about his father, and everything's kind of being done of like what the spirit of thunder is, and kind of ruminating on what it means to be worthy and fighting demons, and how you get to a point where you just kind of live with that darkness, and Gorr really hasn't lived with that darkness where Thor has. That's what makes him worthy. I love how it's talking about how the worst demons that Thor has fought have been within himself, not the actual ones that he has. And, of course, we see that Loki has decided to help him out because this is a two-sided thing. And because Thor needs help defeating Gorr, and what best way than to really go at Gorr's whole thing. And Loki doesn't fight with, like, arms or anything. He just starts telling Gorr all of the stories of everybody that Thor's ever saved, all of the greatest deeds that he's done, and I'm like, that works very well and very much in character with the kind of person Loki is. It fits to his strengths and just really shows at the end when he's like, yeah, Gorr might be right, but Thor is Thor, and this completely breaks and shatters Gorr's perception of what's going on, and we see that Thor wins. That, of course, creation's pretty much knocked at this point and screwed, but there are ways to go around that. There is hope. We see that Gorr's knocked out and Thor's knocked out, and we see that Loki decides to go and restart the sun, and we, of course, learn later how he kind of does that. And then we flip to an interesting part. I didn't know what they were kind of doing, but it really fits into the realm of this whole thing of what is the spirit of thunder and how it kind of ties into stories. And I like, not just like, this is a very great way of showcasing the whole meta-narrative of this, of stories and what they mean and how they're important to everything, to existence. Because that's how these gods live on. This is how Thor lives on. We see Shadrach going through and being berated by the librarian, but he found the Thor section. It's like, wow, this is really good. And we see all these different kind of iterations of Thor that would arrive in different eras, showcasing how important his story of being worthy and doing good will survive no matter what Ragnarok comes, no matter what end comes, because there are beginnings and there are ends, but there is no ultimate beginning and no ultimate end. We just keep going. And it was really kind of cool because we see Thor Cop as he's like dealing with gods acting stupid and trying to like prove which is the better one, and like trying to get on believers. I'm like, I kind of want that to be a story because I love the design of frickin' Thor Cop. I like how he looks, I like how Mjolnir looks, and just like him going around busting gods for being assholes and stuff like that. It just looks so great. Then we get to one where Damon Hellstrom is the Sorcerer Supreme, and this is an era where pretty much all the gods have gone to sleep, and we see like neo-demons infesting stars and everything. We're like, holy sweet Jesus, Sorcerer Supreme magic with like all this cosmic stuff. He's like, I kind of need backup. And who should come? Thor the Thunderworld, essentially making him kind of like an ego-like dude shooting off all these kind of like Uru planets. Well, moons. Because Thor's the planet, and it's like, that's pretty damn cool. But he has changed his form to be something different than a man. We then get to another one where he's Lord of the Ice Apes because he's got amnesia and was like on Jotunheim and just proven to be the strongest. And then this, of course, ice giantess finds him and they fall in love and have a son who becomes the king of Asgard. It's like, holy crap, that's kind of cool. And of course, they're kind of we get back to Shadrach talking about the nature of stories and all that kind of thing, and we get to Balder, who's the king of the Norns. He's got everything back set up. This is present day Marvel, and he's doing it for Carnilla, and how everything's kind of back. We see Jane dealing with herself being Valkyrie and being like, "Hey, Mr. Horse," and going off and doing her stuff. We see Sif being the guardian of the Bifrost, and then we see, of course, our present day Thor. And this is just another great moment where every night, when he's done, he leaves Mjolnir on the throne. And the test for him is to see if he is worthy today to be the All-Father and the King of Asgard. And he lifts it up and says, "Yep, at least for this morning, I'm worthy to do it." Sits down and pretty much gets ready to get to work. It's so effective and it's so simple, but that's just how it can be done, how powerful something can be when it's just these little panels. We see the shot of Mjolnir there, and then we see him moving it, and seeing him sitting down and doing it, and then we get more rumination on like some stories are like some of us. That's what will be stories. Some of those stories are immortal, and like the worthiest continue on no matter what. And Shadrach doesn't want that to end. He wants there to be more stories. So we flip back into the future and we see that we've got some interesting conclusions. Gore is on Indigar and he just keeps saying Thor is Thor is Thor. It had broken his mind, but he seems kind of contented even though he can't really speak much. And we see one of the gods of Indigar being like, "Should we take him out? He's killing the flowers." He's like, "No, we are not his jailers here. He is on this paradise, and we're here for him to be loving gods." And it's nice to see that Gore did go through and do all these terrible things, and he did get defeated. But it really shows the character of who you are and what you do with your defeated foes. Do you destroy them completely and utterly, or do you give them the chance to be better? And to have the things that they didn't have. Now, granted, there's some parts and some enemies that you're like, okay, yeah, he did kind of destroy all of existence. But there's also other people's choices that have to come into effect of all that. And I just like how they ruminate on, okay, would this be considered heaven for Gore or hell? Nobody would know. I'm like, interesting, because is Gore silently screaming in his head, "I hate these gods and everything," but they're being good. They're helping people. Thor proves to you that there are gods that are worthy, that will help people and love people no matter what. So, granted, you might think of that as only one example, but it goes to the core of it. It then inspires his granddaughters to be better gods. It inspires the gods of Indigar to be better gods. It inspires others to do these things. And then, of course, we get back to Midgard and we see that the gods had decided, well, to just work Midgard amongst the mortals and just be alongside him. It's like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And we see that Thor has been restored. He has his arm back. He has his eye back. And he is back, but he has a sense of melancholy, especially on sunny days. And they go to the sun and they see that Loki is keeping the sun alive with his soul and telling its stories. And that's a nice redemption thing for Loki. That's a nice and fitting end for him. And then, of course, they have gone throughout the universe and see that entropy is pretty much taking it down. And Thor, of course, knows what to do. And then they go back to Midgard Thor says something to Mjolnir that we find out is just for him and Mjolnir, and he decides to present his birthright to the birthright of his granddaughters to them, and lays down Mjolnir on the ground, pretty much saying this is his will and testament, and that he's saying goodbye to him as he cries and hugs him, and I was like, wow, that's pretty good. And then they say he actually goes through Midgard and meets with every mortal alive to tell him how much he loves him. And that is a perfect example of who Thor is. You don't really hear of other stories of him doing that. Usually they're high above, but Thor gets down to people. He makes sure he tells everybody he loves that he loves them, and goes off to essentially do kind of an Atlas thing. But there's a nice kind of difference that you can split between. Atlas, in Greek mythology, his punishment for rebelling against the Olympians was to hold the earth up on his shoulders for all of eternity. Thor understands that all of the universe needs to be held up, and he decides to do this himself. He has not done this for punishment. He's not done this as any kind of retribution against any act he has done. He makes the choice. He knows that it is right and good. He chooses to do it, and he goes and sails into the void to keep the pillars of creation up, thundering all the way. And I love how we get another side of Thor as he's talking about like the spirit of thunder and everything, and his relationship with his father. Because can you imagine Odin going through all of Midgard telling all the mortals that he loves them? Not really. And we get the story of how he was annoyed that Thor would cry when it rained and thundered as a child, and even had him thrown out, and there was the worst storm. And when he was brought back in, he had dry eyes. And that I like how it's a kind of a little dig that Odin never understood that it rained because Thor cried. And that kind of works with him. That Thor's first and last words were thunder. And then we get to the end of the issue, and we see, like a rumination, the spirit of a sword is to cut, the spirit of a hammer is to smash, and then the spirit of thunder again. And we see a father talking to his children. They're like, oh God, what's that? And he's like, don't worry, that's the thunder. That's the sound of our God loving us as he's protecting us from the darkness. And we see on the last page that the spirit of thunder is to be heard, like a story and everything. It's like, all right, cool. And the father goes, let me tell you about the story of Thor. And it ends with, amen. And I just really think that this encapsulated a lot of what makes Thor great. Showing him fighting till the end, for all of eternity, for all those who can't themselves. And just being that great character who knows pain, anger, and fear, but chooses good and right and love as his strengths, as we see him beating back the darkness, as we see Loki being inspired by his brother, even though he's been jealous, and restarting the sun, telling stories to keep it warm and to keep others warm as well, and seeing his granddaughters sad that he is leaving, but being worthy enough to carry on his legacy. And it just was a great way to end this arc that Jason Aaron has been doing with Thor. I mean, I've been reading it since it began. I never thought it would take this long, but I'm glad that we got such great stories, and especially this capstone of this ending with it, because it is a great fitting conclusion that really understands Thor and the nature of stories and why they're so important. So those are my opinions on the issue. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.